Good afternoon and welcome to the Authors Hour. Or at least I, have the privilege of being here live on the porch of the Literary Arts Center where the Authors Hour normally occurs. The perhaps downside of that is that we have a bricklayer working on the front walk, so occasionally you'll hear some hammering, but to be honest, that's a little more like the usual Authors Hour where buses and trucks and all kinds of things go by. My name is Fred Zerm. I represent the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center. We're a volunteer organization that aims at supporting and supplementing what the institution does with the Writers Center. And we hope by doing that, we encourage writers and promote writing both at Chautauqua Institution, but especially during these Zoom days beyond Chautauqua Institution. So I will tell you more about some particular activities at halftime. Right now, though, I would like to introduce our first author. Carolyn Haldeman grew up in Atlanta and taught English for 48 years. 44 of those years were at Woodward Academy in College Park, Georgia, where her additional duties included assistant chairman of the English department, coordinator of the mentor intern programs for new teachers, and co-sponsor of Woodward's literary magazine, Silent Voices. For over 20 years, she gave yearly presentations at the University of Columbia Scholastic Press Association. She was awarded the Gold Key for promoting student journalism and a Distinguished Service Award from Southern Interscholastic Press. Presently, she conducts workshops for Chinese exchange students, is an AP literature exam reader for ETS, and is a lay reader at church. She and John, her husband for nearly 5 decades, have 3 children and 5 grandchildren. With her book that she's going to present today, she hopes to do for teachers what Irma Bombeck did for housewives. Let's welcome Carolyn Haldeman.
Thank you, Fred and friends. And thanks to all who've helped me with this memoir, who may not be with us now, but might be on YouTube later. That's a little scary because we'll get to see ourselves on YouTube later. I especially want to thank Julie, who's with us now. She was my best proofreader and cheerleader, and my daughter, who helped. I wouldn't have had a book without her. Elizabeth Flesher is there with her family and my grandchildren. I want to thank Heritage Writers, a group I get to meet with on second and fourth Sundays in a better world when we can meet with friends. We publish this, Bridges. This is the 3rd volume of stories and poetry from this group. It's always good to have support. Readers, writers who love to read and write and love to be part of anyone else who likes to do that. To begin, I want to share a PowerPoint, and Fred's going to help me with this.
It'll come up, I hope.
You got it. You got it. Everybody see it? Nod if you see it. Wave if you see it. Okay. All right. Let's get it started in here. Black Eyed Peas. Number 2. I don't have any words for 2, but this is the picture. You coming with me, Fred?
Yes, it's not responding at the moment.
Oh, okay. Well, any rate, I'll just go ahead.
Let me see if I can fix it.
All right.
I told you we were getting too confident. Okay.
I know. We practiced, guys. We practiced.
So the PowerPoint came up. There it goes.
There you go. You got it. You can skip that one. That's just on the back of the book. Okay. Today's lesson plan, sometimes all we could do is the best that we can as teachers. Next one. A rule breaker's prayer of confession. I confess that I have not loved these rules with my whole heart. I have done what I ought not to have done, and I have not done what I should have done, and there's no hope for me. Next one. what this strange thing is about. Ken Baldowski, my wonderful friend and sketcher, did this one of my time when I was teaching at Fort Rucker in, in Alabama, Fort Rucker, Alabama. I was teaching a night course of helicopter pilots. My job was to help them with composition skills. They were as old as I was, some older. The first time I walked into the classroom, they were all there. And of course, as fellows will do, you know, to young women, they started making little whizzing noises, smacking noises. I came down, I put my arms down with great authority on the podium, and suddenly all the lights went out. The room turned green and a screen came down behind me. Amidst their chuckling, while I tried to reverse what I had just done, there is another button that takes the podium down into the floor, and another one that would have brought a helicopter up from the floor. Fortunately, I didn't hit either of those. Okay, next one. Oh, staying on your feet. This was always hard for me. This particular time that I fell, there are other examples, but this one had to do with trying to get a student's attention. They were on a bus in front of us. We were going to a concert, taking our students. I was in the back. A Coke can falls out of the bus, it's actually thrown out of the bus. So I get out of our car and with authority, bang on the door of the bus. The bus driver opens the door and I proceed to slide down, if you're familiar with kudzu in Georgia, at least it's soft, to the very bottom with the kids up top looking frightened. We went on to sing, and when it was time to leave the second private school of all boys, we couldn't find some of our girls. As it turned out, they were in dark places in torrid embraces with some of these handsome young men at school. The next one, please, sir. We need to encourage our students to enhance presentations. I had interesting guests. I learned that students learn best if they are in charge and they present. So one student chose his interesting guess, a python. I didn't know at the time, and neither did he, that pythons don't have to go to the bathroom, don't have to pee, except every 2 weeks. Apparently, it was Slick's time to pee. Out comes this horrible smell and this deluge. The science teacher who had brought him is saying, "Don't drop him." And I'm saying, "Get him out of here." Well, we had shag carpeting. This might have been back in the 70s, I think. And the smell, every time it rained in that room, was impossible. All right, next, please. I anticipate an administrator's anxiety. I was in the reason that bomb sniffing dogs were brought to Woodward one night. I had hidden plastic eggs with clues in them over the parade field with the assistance of some German exchange students. When we got back to class, students opened the eggs and read their clues. If they could tell what story the quotation was about, they got a surprise. Of course, there were snacks for everyone. Well, a month later, our head of security, Sarge, called me in. He had a piece of rolled up paper with the words, "I'm going to build a bomb and blow up the old coot." Apparently, one egg had not been found until a month later. A student in the practice field took the note and half of a plastic egg to the administration, who thought someone was making a threat, probably against Coach Theodosian, a tough Greek coach. He actually solved the mystery. When he learned that the quotation was found in part of a plastic Easter egg, he said, "You know that white-headed teacher? Well, she asked me if we could hide some Easter eggs on the field if PE students were using it. I was called in, mystery solved. To my embarrassment, the quotation came from Thurber's The Catbirds. If you don't know that. All right, number 9. Be on time or be shamed. We sometimes had trouble getting our 3 kids out of the house to an event. This time we were going to a theater production and we were late. There were parents standing out in the lobby who were also late, nervous to get in and see their child. So I said with great confidence, I'm a teacher. I'll just slightly open the door and see when we can enter. Then suddenly, just as I got my head in, it slammed on my head. John, behind me, my husband, pulled the door open and out came the intimidating director with her hand out that would stop a freight train. When she finally let us in, we were duly challenged. The next one, please. It's hard for teachers to maintain the balance between teaching and being a parent. Once leaving school, I stopped to get milk before we were headed home to go to piano lessons or soccer lessons, whatever was happening that day. Got the milk, came back to the car, headed off, noticed that my son was not in the back seat. Mary, who was back there, where is your brother? I think he's back at the Coke machine. So we did a U-turn back to the Kroger parking lot. Elizabeth was up front with me, the one who's on here today, holding the milk. Needless to say, I wasn't the most patient mom when Jack said, hey, could I have some change for a drink? Next one. Once I left behind a boarding student, actually 2, when we were boarding parents. We did that for 11 years. Bilton had asked April to go to the opera with him because his grandmother had given him 2 tickets. My department chair, Bobby, and I were also going, so I told him they could ride with us. They waited for us at the arch. The door opened, and we heard April. She said, hi, Miss Haldeman. We didn't hear Bilton, but I thought he's in. So, unfortunately, being a gentleman, he had opened the back door for her and gone around. And we had started off, Bobby in the middle of the story, until April said, Miss Haldeman, go back. We've left Bilton. So, bless his heart, so much for his delight in getting the homecoming queen to go with him. The next one, please. This one we don't have to stay on, but it's just the idea of leaning on colleagues. My friend Bobby in the story previously is standing behind me. That was when I was young in teaching, and other colleagues. One of the things I love to do, and we can just pause here for a minute, was to team up. Once the chaplain Lawrence, paused in the midst of his world religions class for me to read Father Mapple's sermon from Moby Dick in his booming yet resonant voice. Although most of his students hadn't read Moby Dick, they too were mesmerized at Melville's magnificent words and Chaplain Lawrence's delivery. Another fun collaboration was putting Emily Grierson on trial posthumously for the murder of Homer Barron from Faulkner's A Rose for Emily. My history friend and colleague Brian, a lawyer before becoming a teacher, was the judge, dressed in his academic gown while our classes chose to be part of the defense or the prosecution. Students on each team selected speakers and helped to prepare arguments. Brian explained the rules of the judicial process, who went first, how to call witnesses, what happens in the summation. My contribution after teaching the story was posing for photographs at the end of the page. And next, please. I can't tell you this story, I don't have time, but it has to do with the 5 years that I taught governor's honors in Valdosta, Georgia. John came down and the whole Com Arts department went down to the Okefenokee and got into canoes, paddled away This had to do with my friend Liz and I, who neither knew how to paddle and saw lots of alligators. Next. These are some of my silent voices, students. I loved each of these kids. Maureen Downey, who's an education writer for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, wrote an article entitled "Teachers Defy Stress with Vision, Camaraderie, a Sense of Purpose." She quotes Jane Morris, who acknowledges that teaching can be hard, heartbreaking, and infuriating, but adds that it's never boring or ordinary or reasonable. And it's usually hilarious. It's always important. You may not realize it daily, but in retrospect, there are those days when we offer our students entrance into the joy of learning. What many former students tell me they remember about our class was a presentation they gave or a friend gave. These are the kids I took with me to New York many times for Columbia Scholastic Press. All I did was the catalyst. There was no magic on my part. And then finally, if we can just flip through the last ones, I'll just read one more thing. How am I doing with time, Fred?
You're doing fine, plenty of time.
Oh, good. Here is one of my favorite students, a now published writer. You can find her works, Rashani Choksi. She is a magnificent student. I can't say that all my students have become wonderful published writers. She might even get a contract for a film from her works. And then the next one, I'm trying to coordinate my students here. We were going to make a movie. What I want you to see are all the artwork, all the clothespins, clotheslines. Students wrote pantoums, sonnets, free verse for every occasion, and we posted them on our closed book line. Next. I was sometimes told I look like Barbara Bush. I didn't see the resemblance, but she was a cardboard cutout in my room for several years until students decided to put my academic gown and hood on her and bent her over double. Next. Here's my friend Sandy, who's with us today. She is with the angel from Look Homeward Angel. After the play, she ended up in the dumpster. A student friend of Sandy's got her out of the dumpster, and she lived in Sandy's room until Sandy gave her to me when the math department moved somewhere else. And a couple more, and we'll be done with this. My grandchildren, guys, are you still there so you can see yourselves? This was in 2015, the year that I retired, playing in my classroom. Next. Striving for relevance even after retirement. When the children call, they'll sometimes say, "Hi, Mom, where's Dad?" Because he generally has answers to the questions I couldn't answer. You know, home improvement questions, tax questions, mostly any kind of questions. And last, it's never too late to be what you might have been. One of my favorite quotations from George Eliot. I never knew that I would get my memoir into a book form, but thanks to Elizabeth, who's with us today, we managed to do it. And then one of my favorite quotations, oh, not that one, although there are some little fellows, we don't see them right now. There he is, a little fellow talking about what laughter can do for us. And we can skip these two. They're chapter titles. And then these words I really love from Richard Rohr. Receptive, flowing people are the ones who change the world and transform history. Their possibilities are limitless because they do not let any seeming barriers stop their path. In fact, they well up from within until they can surmount any obstacle. Be like water is a good piece of advice. And finally, the last piece of advice that I gave to my students, if they were still listening to me on the last day of seniors, this was from 1997. Soon the voices that reach you will not be mine. Ears other than mine will hear your friendly repartee, your answers to the questions from our text. Something profound is called for here, but I can't even get out a passive voice. I know Prufrock's pain. When seeking profundity, he longs to be Lazarus, come from the dead, come back to tell you all, I shall tell you all. Instead, I simply parrot the words from thoughts of those more adept with the gift of language I so long to give you. I ask you to remember Adam and Eve after the fall, when the world was all before them, where to choose their place of rest, and providence their guide. I ask you to remember with Jack Burton that you can't rely on the great twitch or the great sleep. On occasion, there will be for you as for Ishmael a drizzly, dark November in your soul. So let there be laughter, because we mustn't take ourselves too seriously. When in doubt, follow the advice of Socrates and Aristophanes, as Aristophanes presents him in the clouds. Now don't wiggle, and if an idea gets you into any difficulty, let go of it. Withdraw for a bit, and then get your brain to work again, shifting it around and weighing it up. And if that's not enough advice for you, just remember our classroom poster plaudits and invite someone dangerous to tea. Remember the rhythmic incantations of Desiderata from the wisest philosopher of them all, Anonymous. Whatever your labors and aspirations in the noisy confusion of life, keep peace with your soul. The last line has to do with a pole that was in the middle of our classroom. We had to position around it. Finally, students made it into a palm tree with a parrot in it. Just know I love you and want you to be happy. Make palm trees with parrots in them out of all the poles in your way. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. Your students were lucky to have such a loving and skilled teacher.
Oh, well, thank you. There are others here with us, you know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think it's especially appropriate. This is Education Week at Chautauqua, and all the lectures are about that topic, and the book selection this week to a book called The Gifted School. So I think it's very appropriate that we have two teachers, Carolyn and Karen, on the docket today. I'm going to make just a few announcements about the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center and literary events at Chautauqua. We sponsor several weekly happenings. This is one of them. The main other one is Open Mic, which is 5 o'clock on Sunday. I think, Carolyn, did you drop by one Sunday?
I did.
Yeah.
I was intimidated. I didn't read that day.
That's okay. We welcome listeners as well. I'm going to, when I have access to chat again, I'm going to post some information about how you would go to Open Mic. Since you've been to Authors Hour, you should know that the very same Zoom link, because I'm lazy, just put it as a recurring event. You can get back to Authors Hour next week. Next week, we sort of segue, partially because especially the first speaker is about education. Both speakers are talking about their experience as Muslim Americans. Dr. Deborah Almantaser will be talking about her book, and actually trying to lead a discussion about the topic, but her book is Leading While Muslim, The Experience of Muslim Principles After 9/11. The second author next week will be Sabiha Rahman. She has a book called Threading My Prayer Rug, One Woman's Journey from Pakistani Muslim to American Muslim. So keep that in mind. Some things have passed. The deadline for the writing contest we sponsor was Sunday. So I don't know why I'm mentioning it, because it's too late. But on the 16th, winners will be announced, and we're trying to see whether that's going to be a public Zoom announcement or not. You should know Yes, I see the recording button is still going. So you should know that this and other authors' hour videos are available on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel. So I will post that link too, because it's way too extended for me to memorize and give to you and expect you to memorize. Although if somehow you lose the link, if you go to YouTube and put Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center channel, for some reason it doesn't pop up at the top, but it will be there eventually for you to check out. I want to introduce our next writer. Once I pop up the bios. Karen Weyant is a poet and essayist whose work has been published in Crab Orchard Review, Crab Creek Review, seems like there's a little crab motif going on here, Cream City Review, Harper Palette, Lake Effect, River Styx, and Whiskey Island. She was too modest to include it, but I believe she's been nominated for at least 2 Pushcart Prizes, which are sort of the equivalent of the Pulitzer Prize, except for small literary magazines. She is the author of 2 poetry chapbooks, from which she'll be reading today, Stealing Dust in 2019 and Wearing Heels in the Rust Belt 2012. She lives, reads, and writes in Warren, Pennsylvania, where she is at the moment, and is an associate professor of English at Jamestown Community College in Jamestown, New York. Let's welcome Karen Weyant.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm fine.
Thank you for having me here today, Fred. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm going to assume. Okay. A few things. First off, Carolyn, I really enjoyed your book. I especially enjoyed the story about the snake, only because my first semester teaching in the Penn State system many years ago, I taught wildlife biologists, and I discovered that, yes, wildlife biologists, when they give presentations, like to have really nice live snake props. And I had a young man who gave his whole presentation, and he had a backpack with him, and I couldn't figure out why he had his backpack with him until he reached into it and brought out a big boa constrictor. Okay, and to this day, I don't think I've ever seen students vacate a room so fast in my life. So now when I talk to my students about presentations, I do talk to them about the importance of perhaps not bringing in live props with them. So, okay, so today I'm going to be reading from my chapbook. It is an older chapbook. For those of you who know me at Chautauqua, you know that I started at Chautauqua many years ago, and many of the poems in this book were born at Chautauqua. But I don't do as much poetry writing as I once did. I've kind of, as the way I don't follow the rules of the world, and I was a teacher many years and a writer for many years, and I went back and got my MFA later on in life and became an essayist. So I never did things like I was supposed to, okay? But I am going to read a few poems from this chapbook, and I have to say, it's called Wearing Heels in the Rust Belt, and it's about growing up in Rust Belt, Pennsylvania. And there is kind of an apocalyptic mood because I grew up in the 80s. And I was reading some of these poems again last night thinking about, yes, it's not the same of what's going on now, but yes, there are some similar themes of gloom and doom, I guess you could say. So I'm going to open up with a poem, and there's a mythology figure in this poem, and the mythology figure is Cassandra. Does anybody know who Cassandra was?
No.
Okay. Cassandra is, I got some hands, good. Cassandra is my favorite figure in mythology because she's so tragic. She was given the gift to foretell the future, but when the gods thought that she would be too dangerous, they cursed her with the fact that nobody would believe her.
You need to read me.
Okay. So that's kind of the watered down mythology version, but I always liked the figure of Cassandra. And this poem is called Advice for All the Rust Belt Cassandras. Let everyone call you Cassie or Cass or even Cassie Joe, although you have no middle name. In the mornings, shake sawdust from your hair, write your name on both of your wrists. Use a peeling sunburn as blush, and braid your hair with the curls of truck exhaust. At the nearest corner store, smile at the cashier who hands back your change, her 10-minute break lingering on the last dollar bill. Forget that you've known her since grade school, one of those girls who coughed years before her camels, whose skin turned yellow long before she grew nicotine stains on her fingers. Don't talk about how lumber mill smoke hovers too close to every curb, how the saltbox-shaped houses on South Main snuggle too close to the river. Don't mention the nightmares of ivy fingering through farmhouses and factories, how the last silo on Sycamore Road will take a deep breath, forget to exhale and collapse, drowning a farmer in his own harvest. Use every dusk, then walk to the football field, sit under the bleachers, watch how sunlight splinters wood and shadows to cigarette butts and broken beer bottles. Run your fingers over hearts and initials that have not yet been carved. So that's kind of a lyrical poem. Thank you. Most of my poems actually are more narrative, and many of my students ask me when they read my poems if they're true. That's a pretty common response from people who are new to poetry, especially contemporary poetry. And I always tell my students that many ways poems belong more in fiction than nonfiction. Okay, some poets out there may disagree, okay? And that I'm not always the speaker in the poems, but I know her very well. Okay, so the next poem figures, kind of stars a small bird called a shrike. And I'm not sure if people know what a shrike is, but a shrike is a bird that is especially fascinating to me. They're pretty rare in Western Pennsylvania, but I did see one not too long ago. They are known for, and this is going to sound kind of morbid, impaling their prey on thistles, barbed wire fences. That's because they have very small beaks. And this poem guest stars a shrike. It's called Dry Spell. For weeks we were thirsty. Back roads sulked and shuffled, coughed up dust that lingered on our bare knees, our elbows, and the thin straps of our sandals. Farmers nailed crows to the doors of their barns. Parents worried, smiling with creases cut into their lips, and then had memories of nightmares of chalk outlines on faded wood. It's a shrike, my brother said, sure of the culprit, flicking the victims. A sparrow with barbed wire poking through stiff feathers, goldfinches draped over speed limit signs, a field mouse I pried loose from a purple thistle, paws limp in prayer, fur still soft next to my cheek when I strained, listening for a single heartbeat. Hey, I grew up in, I don't want to really say a religious household, but religion was very, very a prominent part of my childhood. So a lot of religious figures are in my poems. This one is titled Lament for the Last Summer of Prayer. Not yet 7, I still believed I could talk to God the way my mother spoke on the phone. Head bent to the side, her whole body curved when she cradled the receiver. For weeks, she dodged my father's out-of-work pacing. Her fingers twirled the telephone cord, strangling the hot kitchen air tight. I never really knew who she was talking to. I just heard words like money, makeup, loud muffler, every M a low murmur, lost between her lips. I avoided her smile that failed to curve at the corners and hid underneath the back porch to watch summer break through the toothed leaves of dandelions. My sister flicked cigarette sparks and specks of red nail polish from the tips of her toes. My brother worked construction, peeled his boots off his tired feet. Hard bits of tar worked loose from the heels, rained down a summer hailstorm. Flat on my back, I watched the back of the stairs sag, the wooden knots squeezed tight with each step. I'm sorry, I whispered. I wasn't sure what for. I dug my hands into the ground, hoping my palms would form a prayer, surprised when I found that blood seeped underneath my fingernails. Okay, I'm checking the time. I will read one more poem, and a lot of my poems really do have, as I mentioned before, kind of an apocalyptic feel to them. Again, it was the 80s, but a lot of the images coming up in my poems I'm finding very prevalent now, such as blue-collar work, but also a lot of, as we all know, the unemployment rate is high. It's especially high in my part of the world. A lot of people out of work. A lot of people are very discouraged. It's true where I live, believe it or not, we have not been hit with the pandemic, okay? I live in a county that has probably the lowest number of cases in the state of Pennsylvania, which is pretty incredible. But we are definitely feeling the other effects of the economy and other things that are happening. So again, a lot of my poems, even though this is an older chapbook, kind of reflect what's going on even now. But I do want to end on a poem that I think is a little bit more optimistic and that is a favorite, believe it or not, with my students. The poem is called Roadkill Girls. We fled summer's heat for the shade of Sycamore Road. Barefoot and cat-scratched, we posed as princesses, wearing cockleburs as crowns, blue chicory for corsages. We sidestepped beer cans and broken glass, kicked coils of razor and whiskey bottle, often filled with thick pools of tobacco spit. Bones rested in the nests of gravel and guardrails, whole skeletons scattered by tractors and pickup trucks. We knew what peered out from behind the ragweed and purple thistle, what curled around bent speed limit signs. For every antler or loose feather we found, groundhog teeth, a set of claws, soft wisps of a rabbit's tail. Sometimes we grew brave. We flicked maggots from fresh kill, the dull thud of soft bodies hitting tree bark, reminding us of June bugs hurling against back doors and bedroom windows. At the end of each day, we whisked our treasures home and decorated our rooms. The skulls on our dressers never scared us, even when a jaw curved into a smile or the empty eye sockets all winked. With every bone, we planned our new world, starting with a single rib from a raccoon. So, thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Karen. Very visceral and evocative poetry. Wonderful. I've heard some of them before, but it was nice to hear them again. And so nice to hear from two teachers during Education Week. Thank you both. Thank you again, Carolyn. In chat, if you open chat, I put quite a few things. For some reason during PowerPoint, I couldn't find chat, but we had a backlog. So there are ways to get Carolyn's book. There are ways to get more information about Karen, and especially the Wearing High Heels in the Rust Belt, that book. There's information about how to find out more about the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center. Also, if you want to find out just more information about Chautauqua, if you've never been here, I'd like to urge you to put it on your bucket list, okay? So there's also a general website for Chautauqua where you can find out more about the institution, but also if you go to assembly.chq.org, there are lots of streaming events on the official institution platform, usually at least 2 lectures a day, musical performances, master classes. There are classes available. At 1:15, I'm in a prose class. So the Writers Center is alive and well on the internet. So please consider that. Consider joining the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center to help support things like the Author's Hour. And I want to thank you, but I do want to invite you to see whether you have any questions. I think we're a small enough group that if you just wave your hand because you have a question, that would be fine. If you're shy and you want to type it on chat, that would be fine too. Questions, or I would also invite compliments, okay, if you want to do that.
May I say something, Fred?
Sure, Carolyn.
How soon will this be on YouTube? Because I had people ask me, but who couldn't be with us in the middle of the day. I see my sweet cousin Suzanne.
I can guarantee it by tomorrow. I hope sometime this evening. I have a few commitments before I can get back to it.
No rush.
Okay. Okay. Any questions for the authors or comments for the authors?
I just wanted to say to Karen, I love your imagery. My goodness, so visceral.
Thank you. I tend to be pretty image driven, that so much so that I almost drown myself in my writing. I have to be careful.
Held my attention.
As a poet, I'm a little bit sad you've gone into the essay land, but I hope to read some of your essays soon, and that'll probably temper my sadness. Okay.
Well, I'm hoping to come back to poetry. Phil Terman, for many of you know who Phil Terman is always telling me, he's like, you can never forget poetry, Karen. So yeah, I do.
You can't go home again. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. And I did write one poem this year, if that counts, but it's definitely, I've been in essay land, so yeah.
Okay, great. If there are no questions or comments, I want to thank you.
Carol has one.
Oh,
Carol has one, but she's muted.
I'm not in gallery view, so I can't see that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, she's muted.
Carol, you're muted.
You're muted.
Carol Townsend?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I can't unmute.
Oh, there.
Did
that work?
Yep,
Yeah,
there you go.
got it.
Okay.
We got you.
Okay, Karen, I was wondering what marked the turn into being an essayist. What provoked that?
Well, it's kind of complicated. Like I said, in the way that my world works, I needed to get graduate credits to get promotion at my school. So I started an MFA program, and I asked some advice from poets. Should I get my MFA in poetry or essay writing, nonfiction, because I love to read nonfiction. And the advice was that I'd been writing for poetry for so long that yes, I would learn something, but I wouldn't learn as much as if I went into nonfiction. And I went into nonfiction writing through my MFA, and I just fell in love with personal essays. I fell in love with especially what women are doing with personal essays right now. And poetry and essays actually overlap quite a bit. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I guess that's what happened. You can blame the MFA for that. I went back to get a few credits for promotion, and I ended up getting a whole new degree, which was unexpected. So
great. Thank you.
Are there any more waving hands? Like I said, since I'm recording this, I'm in speaker view and not in gallery view, so I can't see everybody. Nothing? Well, I do want to thank Carolyn one more time. Let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I want to thank everyone for coming. I hope you come back to these and other events, even if you don't know the authors or have never heard of them. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Anyway, take care.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you for
Bye.
coming.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you both for sharing.